Zach, we are back and we are talking dynasty moves to make or not. Right now, we are diving into a boatload of things today. We're talking some headlines, some injury updates. But before we get into that, we hope you guys enjoy the video. If you do, please leave a like, comment down below what moves you're trying to make this week. And we'd love to help you out over on our Patreon Discord, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in that Discord server for a free 7-day trial and see what we can do for your dynasty teams. But Zach, with all that said, all the promo in the books, let's get to the content that people came for. First and foremost, we got to talk through some of these injuries, some of these headlines that have kind of taken us over this week. So the first and foremost, I know we haven't been a fan of this guy. We've ripped him quite a bit on this channel for poor play, whatever the case is, being a bit of a disappointment since he's come back in the league. But Deshaun Watson, torn Achilles, out for the rest of the year, a guy trying to get his career back on track. And it doesn't look like it's definitely not going to happen in 2024. So, Zach, you wanted to kind of talk about if we were buying or selling, avoiding holding any of these guys as we discuss some of these injuries. So, Deshaun Watson, I assume, is still a pure avoid for you, nothing more, nothing less. What do you think about this one?
This is just not a situation I have any interest in getting into whatsoever. I at this point, I don't even want to clog my roster with Deshaun Watson because that's what he's going to be for the next 10, 11 months at minimum. And so I just have no interest in the situation whatsoever, Bob.
Yeah, I'm with you. This is a pure avoid. I just one of those situations. I too don't have any shares. I'm happy to be removed from this situation. If you have them and you can sell them for anything at this point, I'm more than happy to do so. Unfortunately, if he was your quarterback 2, I feel very bad for you because he was a pretty poor quarterback 2. Hopefully, he was your quarterback 3. But we got to find a solution for a lost quarterback that was hopefully just a reserve for you, but might be more. But maybe we'll talk to that a little bit later. But the 49ers have some unfortunate. They are getting bit by the injury bug. They're even getting bit by the health bug. So first and foremost, Brandon Ayuk. This hurts me a lot because I have him everywhere. Torn ACL and MCL, going to miss the rest of the season. Continuing on with the 49ers drama, Debo Samuel, that is, has pneumonia. There's no timetable for his return. George Kittle has a foot sprain. He's currently day-to-day. And CMC still on the mend, hopeful, see those words, hopeful for a Week 10 return after their bye week. So, Zach, let's peel this 49ers drama apart a little bit. And drama isn't the right word. It's not really drama. It's just poor injury luck and, dealing with sickness, whatever you want to call it. Are any of these guys buys? Are any of these guys sells? What are you looking to do with this 49ers? Basically, the entire 49ers offense that is not Brock Purdy at this point. Their normal offense that is not Brock Purdy at this point. What are you thinking?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy for my Ricky Pearsall shares.
Sure.
But, you're never happy at the expense of what's been happening. These are devastating injuries. The Ayuk injury looks like a multi-ligament knee injury, which is just something I just don't want a part of right now. Those injuries tend to take even longer than your typical single ligament injury, your ACL, your MCL. This is 2. And even in the post by Schefter, it said there could be more damage. Like, at this point, you're talking about the structure of the knee. I'm not saying he won't be back. I'm just saying I'm not looking to buy at this specific moment. I could be interested in the offseason given the price. He will come back. He's young. He has all the medical attention in the world at his disposal. I do think Brandon Ayuk comes back. I don't know when. I don't know how he looks when he comes back. But this is a situation I don't want Brandon Ayuk right now. So I'm avoiding Brandon Ayuk at this point. If we're talking Christian McCaffrey, if we're talking Deebo Samuel, yeah, I'd still be interested in Deebo Samuel. Deebo does put up a lot of numbers without Brandon Ayuk in the lineup. But it just is seeming like it's just not the 49ers year, right? With all and these are like very significant things. Pearsall shot in the chest. CMC, 2 potential Achilles that we're worried about. Pneumonia, a multi-ligament knee. Like, these are very, very serious injuries, and it's just seeming like it's not the 49ers season. And so do I want to buy it? I might be interested in CMC, although I'm just so afraid of not getting my ROI, my return on investment there. And it's still probably pretty expensive to buy Christian McCaffrey. It's probably a timeshare situation now with Jordan Mason just because of the health of Christian McCaffrey and the Achilles.
Sure.
Maybe there's some kind of ramp up to Christian McCaffrey where they get him more and more reps as we get to the playoffs, which is good for your fantasy teams, by the way. You're getting more and more usage for Christian McCaffrey as you get to your fantasy playoffs, which is good. I don't know, but I think that's what you're going to see, at least if the 49ers are trying to go into the playoffs with all cylinders firing. But who knows, if they lose one or two more games here, they're 3-4 as of recording this. So, if they're 3-6, 3-7, or 4-7, I'm not saying they wave the white flag, but I'm saying, do they ramp up Christian McCaffrey as if they were 7-4 and trying to make a run at the Super Bowl? So that's more buyer beware. I can't tell you to go out there and buy Christian McCaffrey. I'm also not selling Christian McCaffrey. I think I'm just holding at that point. But I think if I was to buy one player that's injured on that team, it would be Deebo Samuel, just because he will be back at some point. We don't know. But he seems to be the person that's in for the most workload if he were fully healthy in that offense at this point.
Yeah, I think, and this is purely because we still haven't seen a great tight end renaissance this year. If there's any dip in George Kittle, if he misses a week, that is absolutely somebody I want to go target. He's been right up there with Brock Bowers in terms of production. I want every bit of it if he's still playing. And I think he, like Deebo, is going to just soak up work, especially if we don't see CMC return. So that would probably be my preferred buy. I do like Deebo as well, because you're not dealing with, granted, who knows, maybe there's something to be said about pneumonia's long-term effects, short long-term effects on the lungs and, conditioning, whatever the case is, if that hinders him at all. I don't know, not a doctor, but there's no there's no hamstring issue. There's not a knee issue we're worrying about where possible re-injury comes into play. So Deebo is an interesting buy, and he's been proven to be productive when he's the primary wide receiver in the lineup as well. So I like both of those. I am staying far away from CMC. I don't want anything to do with those Achilles. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is probably a pretty solid buy if you're a rebuilding team and you maybe have a Terry McLaurin, a Chris Godwin, any of these guys putting up points right now that you could flip for something like this. Maybe you weren't a rebuilding team coming into the season. Maybe your season has not gone according to plan. Brandon Ayuk, somebody to invest in. I just made a trade, and this is not Brandon Ayuk, but somebody who was probably pretty similar value, Rashee Rice. I moved Rashee Rice in a deal for A.J. Brown. And I think for the trajectories of the team, it was the exact same scenario I just kind of brought to light. Was this team that had A.J. Brown, they were coming into the season hell-bent on winning a championship or at least going to the playoffs. And they've been absolutely let down by how their season has gone. So they made this move with me to get a younger player, shift gears to next year, who might be, I don't want to say more productive than A.J. Brown in the deal, but to kind of get some points off their roster, better their pick. You get an older player off their roster as well. And I think you could do something similar with Brandon Ayuk if you're a competitive team. Use one of those wide receivers I mentioned, one of those vets, as a launch pad to get to Brandon Ayuk. You're not getting that deal done straight up, but just thoughts to be had. And one player that I would absolutely love to go buy right now, I'm still very much in. We have this knee injury for DK Metcalf week to week with a grade 1 MCL sprain. No fun, but this is, I'd guess he'll probably miss a week, but you never know. It could be longer, could not miss any time at all. But a guy I definitely want in on is Zack. Are you also buying in on DK Metcalf in this offense right now?
Yeah, DK was a name I think we talked about before the season that was getting a little bit too much disrespect. That's come to fruition, and we always do this thing. Like, he's kind of in that nebulous age, right, and contract situation where it's like he's not tethered to the team for the next 4 years. He's also not 23 years old, but he's only 26. He's not old by any means necessary. DK Metcalf, a player I'd absolutely love to buy into. I'm not sure that you could. There's a much bigger buying window right now in DK Metcalf. I could be wrong, but if there is, I'd love to get in on him. His price remains unchanged because of this injury.
All right, so kind of speaking to what I just mentioned with Rashee Rice and a second-round pick for DK Metcalf. Zack, are you in on that deal?
Rashee Rice and a second-round pick for DK Metcalf? Yep. Wow. That's expensive for DK Metcalf. if I was in a competitive situation where I had lost Rashee Rice, maybe I'd want a little kickback on that second round pick. Can you give me a third? Can you give me a fourth? But yeah, I get that. I get that if I'm in a competitive situation and I lost what I was expecting to be a top 15, top 20 wide receiver, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, and I think the thing to think about with Rashee Rice is there's this looming suspension out there too. He's not only going to miss the rest of this year, but there's this suspension out there in the wind that could get cashed in at any time. I don't think he's going to miss the season or anything like that next year, but it just could be a little bit added time. I tend to agree. I think it's tough to say in the fog of war, as they say. Rashee Rice is probably still more value than DK Metcalf in most cases. So you get Rashee Rice in a second, but you have to be on a clear path to a rebuild looking to next year to be wanting to do this move. DK Metcalf for James Cook. How do you feel about that one?
That's a pretty even deal. Yeah, I think both teams benefit from that. Sounds like there's some positional variance in terms of the need there. So that deal totally makes sense. Yeah, I'd be into that.
Similar kind of concept just made today. DK Metcalf for Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, again, rebuilding team there, competing team there, totally makes sense. I just put this out there. It's so early to buy into the injury of Brandon Ayuk, and it's probably a good time to do so. Do I want to do that at the expense of a piece I can still build around in a rebuild in DK Metcalf? Probably not. So I get it. I understand that deal. It's not something that I would promote other people to do. Like I said, I understand the logic of it, but it's still a young piece. Like I can build around DK Metcalf just as much as I can build around Brandon Ayuk. When I say you get rid of points, you don't need to get rid of points that can help you in your rebuild. Like he fits the timeline of your rebuild. He'll be 27 years old or 28 years old in the next year or two. So I get it. It's just not something that I would do.
Then we got Jayden Daniels with a rib injury, also week to week. Not currently expected to miss any time, but it's definitely something to monitor. Like I said, he's week to week, not day to day. So there's, I remember Nico Collins was day to day with his hamstring injury, and then he's on IR. So anything can happen real quick at the drop of a hat. This doesn't really do anything for his value to me. It doesn't, push him downboards, doesn't push him up, obviously, because it's an injury. But does this, part of the concern with Jayden Daniels was, can he stay healthy with how he runs with the ball and can take hits over time? Does this throw any concern to you with Jayden Daniels for the long term? Because honestly, like Jayden Daniels has by far and away surpassed the expectations I had for him coming into the season. I mean, and I can't imagine anybody was expecting him to be quarterback 2 at this point in the season. So does this do anything for you? Are you still pretty much in on Jayden Daniels? I know last time we discussed him, you kind of wanted to see how he fared against some stronger competition, which is yet to come. But Zach, where are you at on Jayden Daniels right now?
Yeah, Jayden Daniels did look good against the Ravens. I got to give him some credit there. Pretty nice effort in that game. The one thing that's interesting is that Marcus Mariota looked pretty good this week too. I'm not trying to take away from Jayden Daniels. I'm just trying to look at the situation and say, well, this other quarterback that has not been able to perform in a lot of offenses also performed in this offense. But, no, I'm not dismayed by the injury that he sustained this last week. But at the same time, I think your buying window for Jayden Daniels has you've missed that. And you know what? Just props, as somebody that I was just not buying into in this offseason, afraid of the hits. And you got to understand, I'm a Dolphins fan. I've seen my quarterback take too many hits. And so I was afraid of, the hits that I saw Jayden Daniels take in college. And, to his credit and to Cliff Kingsbury's credit, they have not been exposing him to those kinds of plays, and he's not exposing himself to those kinds of plays. So, and I'm okay with that situation because that was the risk that I took before the season. If I was in situations to ever draft Jayden Daniels, I made sure that I got a good quarterback. Like I remember in one of my drafts, I traded out of that pick and I traded for Jordan Love. So it's not like I'm feeling bad about not drafting Jayden Daniels in a lot of those situations. But look, I think that he's shown so far to be a very, very good young quarterback. I still want to see it more. I want to see it consistently. I want to see it against better teams, and I want to see it for a bigger sample size as well. We've seen so many quarterbacks come in and be good for a few games, 1, 2, and I know that he's been good for 5 or 6 at this point. But I want to keep seeing it. I want to see defenses get film on him, pick up on his tendencies, different game plans, have 6 guys in the box, have 7 guys in the box, have 8 guys in the box, try and stop Jayden Daniels. I'm not saying literally I want to see teams have 8 in the box. I just want to see different game plans against him until I go out there and pay the price that it would take to buy into a Jayden Daniels. But so far, so good for him. He gets 2 thumbs up for me. Nothing but love. And I'm happy to be wrong on a player like Jayden Daniels.
Definitely agree with you. It'll be interesting to see how his division rivals do now that they have a full game against him. They get to play him again, kind of see how he does in those games, how the defenses adapt to him, and kind of go from there. But you talked about your quarterback of your Miami Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa is expected to be back or hopeful to return in Week 8, along with Cooper Kupp, who logged a full practice for the Thursday, ahead of the Thursday night game, I should say, today, Monday, as of recording. And Malik Neighbors expected to return as well, all in Week 8. So are these some guys where I know I'm still in on Tua. I know, people are going to freak out about the concussion thing, but the thing is, when Tua's playing, Tua plays good. When he's healthy, he's playing well. And at the end of the day, call me a fool for wanting to still buy in or being willing to, but I'm sure the price has dropped on Tua since the most recent concussion issue. Still very interested on that. I'm far less likely to want to buy in on Cooper Kupp. As he's aged, we just see these injuries keep popping up. Although while Puka Nacua is not there, there's not a lot of offensive players to be had around Matthew Stafford to throw to, outside of, good old Colby Parkinson. And Jordan Whittington's been doing some things down there as well. And Zach, I'd love to be able to buy in on Malik Neighbors any chance I could. But another guy who I think your buy window on him is just long gone. And I don't know if there was ever much of one. But Zach, are you interested in any of these guys? Are you selling these guys now that they're back? We're expecting to see them in game action again. I assume Malik Neighbors not, but maybe Tua or Cooper Kupp. What are your thoughts on these guys expected to return this week?
Well, hopefully in situations where I have Cooper Kupp, it's a competitive situation. You don't want to be in a rebuilding situation and have held on to that up until this point. Even you should have sold him before the season started. So if I have Cooper Kupp and I'm a competing team, I don't want to sell. I want to keep and just get what I can out of that, at least for the season. He was playing so well before the injury, and Puka's still not there. Might come back in another week or two, but I still want part of that Cooper Kupp train if I can hop on it if I'm a competing team. Tua, I don't want any Tua at all anymore. I'm off the train for the same reasons that I just discussed with Jayden Daniels and not wanting to have him prior to drafting our rookies because of the hits that he takes. I just don't want any part of Tua anymore at this point. It's too much of a risk. He hasn't shown that he understands when not to take a hit. I mean, I know on the record it's 4 concussions in reality, because the one where he stumbled and it's his back, that was a concussion. It's not a player I want to buy into anymore. If I can get a sell window after a good game, I'd be all about it. But can you buy Malik Neighbors at this point? I don't think you can. Can you?
I was very curious. I wanted to look up some trades that have happened today. The first one I got off the rip for you, Drake May and a 26 second round pick for Malik Neighbors. Are you in on that deal or not?
Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, you and me both. Marvin Harrison Jr. for Malik Neighbors, straight up wide receiver for wide receiver. We know how I feel about that, but
I know a lot of people are going to say to do it. I'm very patient with my rookies. I'm going to say to not do it, but I don't care if you do that. If you want the Malik Neighbors experience more than the Marvin Harrison experience, that's fine. I can't really diagnose what's been going on with the Cardinals, why that offense isn't functioning, at least to a better degree. I don't want to say a high degree, but a better degree in some of these games. But I do think that Malik Neighbors is going to experience a quarterback change after this season, and we don't know how that's going to go. We don't know if the quarterback's going to be good. We don't know if the quarterback's going to be bad. At the very least, and this is what I've said the entire time about Daniel Jones, he's not a good player. He's not a good fantasy quarterback, but at the very least, he does what you want your rookie wide receivers to do, is play in a system where the quarterback just throws them the ball. Because you and I have so many shares of Chris Olave, and it sucks because he gets 4 targets, he gets 5 targets. You got game-winning drives where the Saints are throwing balls to Mason Tipton and Bub Means, And Chris Olave, the wide receiver one, is the greatest decoy ever, and he doesn't get targets. And it has nothing to do with his ability to get open. It has nothing to do with his ability to catch the ball. It has everything to do with people just like, it sounds so dumb because we're doing this like Tuesday morning quarterback thing, but it's the fact of the reality is the New York Giants suck. Daniel Jones sucks, and he still throws the ball to Malik Neighbors. At least they get that right. The Saints, for whatever reason, try to be the cutest team ever and throw the 14th screen of the game to Alvin Kamara. It doesn't work. It doesn't fool anybody. They deserve to be 2-5. There's a lot of other players that fit into this category, but at the very least, he gets those random targets. So if you can get it on Malik Neighbors, by all means, I'm in. If it costs Marvin Harrison Jr. to do it, you want to flip-flop rookie wide receivers, sure, no problem.
And the last bit of news that we have to cover, and this is a point that, if nothing else, should further drive home the fact that it doesn't matter what you want the NFL to do, you need to adjust to what the NFL is going to do. Russell Wilson starts over Justin Fields. Looks good. That Steelers team put on a clinic, especially in the second half, just routing the Jets. Another team certainly in turmoil. Both New York teams not looking so hot this year. I don't think that's a huge surprise to a lot of people who just heard me say that. But Zach, what do you think about this whole Russell Wilson, Justin Fields situation? Is Russell Wilson a buy, a sell? What are we thinking about Justin Fields as well, sitting on the sidelines, watching Russell Wilson throw dimes all game? What do you think?
I mean, I definitely don't want any part of Justin Fields. He's a good spot start. I don't know if Justin Fields will ever have the full reins of a team, at least at any point soon, right? You could definitely see a career renaissance of Justin Fields, like you've seen for Baker Mayfield, like you've seen for Sam Darnold, like you've seen for Geno Smith, if he sits for a little while and kind of just absorbs. And I think, by the way, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. That's working for NFL quarterbacks, like just sitting for a while and just absorbing information and being able to, just watch. It's working for NFL quarterbacks. But I don't want any part of Justin Fields at this point. I will say this about Russell Wilson. If I need a quarterback, I'm interested in Russell Wilson because I think that Russell Wilson and what's the offensive coordinator? Arthur Smith. I think that is a really good pairing of quarterback and offensive coordinator. I think that those two are I think Russell's going to do what Arthur Smith wants him to do, and Arthur Smith is going to call a game plan to kind of protect Russell Wilson and put him in situations to just, give George Pickens, again, we talked about this earlier, just throw the ball to George Pickens, right? Just put it in the zip code and he'll catch it. He'll figure it out. But when George Pickens gets 3 targets, what's he going to do? We have this conversation in our Discord all the time. It's like, well, he's not getting targeted. He must not be open. It's like, no, that's not how this works. Sometimes coordinators get too cute or quarterbacks they try too hard. And it's just, hey, this is your best player. Either figure out a way to get him the ball or just throw him the ball. And as I said with Daniel Jones, at least he does that with Malik Neighbors. And Russell Wilson did that yesterday with George Pickens. I think he was targeted like 10 times yesterday. And none of them were plays where George Pickens is just wide open. He was actually blanketed quite a bit, and it didn't matter. So I think this is a situation where Russell Wilson is going to do what Arthur Smith wants him to do. And Arthur Smith is going to run an offense that's going to protect Russell Wilson and put him in situations to succeed. And as a matter of fact, I want to talk about more Pittsburgh Steelers later.
All right, good deal. And then, so let's talk about Russell Wilson a little bit more because I'm kind of with you. I'm interested in him as a bit of a buy. And let's talk about some trades that happened today for Russell Wilson real quick before we move on into our panic meter segment. 2 2025 third-round picks for Russell Wilson. Zach, where are you at on that?
Absolutely. I think that's a great deal. There's not a lot of risk involved in sending third-round picks. I mean, what is the hit rate of third-round picks anyways? I think that Russell Wilson is the quarterback for the rest of this year, notwithstanding any major injuries. And if they continue to play this brand of football where they're dominating teams and they make a run at the playoffs, I think Russell Wilson is the quarterback here next year. I don't know what that contract situation looks like. I don't know how it works with the money that he's owed from Denver, but I just believe that if he plays the kind of football that he played yesterday, it wasn't anything that special. It's just that we haven't seen Russell Wilson do that in so long. Like, just be a good, above average quarterback. I think we saw him be very average last year, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. And I think he's playing with much better skill position players than he was in Denver last year, and that's showing. So, I at the very least, he's the quarterback for the rest of the season. If I had to put my money on it, he's the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025 as well. I'm not saying 2026 or 2027. I don't know what that looks like, but this is a kind of football that can win and get into the playoffs. And so I don't see any reason why the Steelers would move off of Russell Wilson, at least for one more season.
How do you feel about a presumed late 25 second round pick? Just one second round pick.
I'm okay with that if I need a quarterback. Okay. Would I rather start a Michael Wilson in the flex or Russell Wilson? I'd rather start Russell Wilson every single Sunday than a flex player that can get me 15 points but can also get me 5. I'd much rather have a Russell Wilson in that spot.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then the last one, just because I know it's a bit of a point of contention, Will Levis was traded for Russell Wilson. And this is easy for me. I don't have much faith in Will Levis going forward. I'm going Russell Wilson here myself, and I'm taking it all the way to the bank. And I think Russell Wilson in general, you touched on, if you need a quarterback, if you just lost Deshaun Watson, if you're not sure of Tua, if whatever quarterback is missing time or on a bye week, Russell Wilson, great fill-in at an affordable cost. Zach, Will Levis or Russell Wilson?
I don't really think this is a real question. I'm going to go Russell Wilson. I mean, Will Levis is getting soft benched right now. Yeah, you're telling me a shoulder injury and where he fully practiced the entire week is keeping him out of the games on Sunday? False. That is a lie. They are lying to you.
I love that.
That's what we call a soft benching.
I love that phrase, a soft bench. I'm a big fan of that phrase, Zach. And I'm a big fan of our next segment. Some people are fans. Let us know who you're panicking about down in the comments. But we're going to talk first about who we're talking about, who we might be panicking on. We polled our Discord. These were two of the names that popped the absolute most for me. Panic meter, Zach, on Michael Pittman Jr. Currently, the wide receiver, 45 points per game, has played all 7 weeks so far, has not had his bye week yet. That's set for quite a bit later in the season. And he's not much better in fantasy scoring in general. He's wide receiver 30. So Michael Pittman, a guy you're not really getting what you're paid for. He was valued around a wide receiver 2 to start the season. So on the season, fine. But in a weekly sample size being wide receiver 45, just not good. And a lot of that is in 1 week as well. Outside of that 1 week, it's been dismal. So panic meter level for you, Zach, on Michael Pittman Jr.
This is a 10. This is a 10, and it really doesn't have anything to do with Michael Pittman Jr. By the way, the 1 week that he popped was not with his starting quarterback. It was with Joe Flacco. Anytime Joe Flacco's in the lineup, you start Colts wide receivers. Anytime Anthony Richardson is in the lineup, you do not start Colts wide receivers. That is the principle moving forward for the rest of the season, how I am following guidelines. Look, I do think they missed Jonathan Taylor. I don't know how much more accurate Anthony Richardson gets. Like, I saw that game yesterday as a Dolphins fan. It was miserable. Look, I know in June I'll be dying for that brand of football, but that was an awful game to watch. It was so bad. Anthony Richardson is bad. He's part of it is his receivers weren't getting a lot of separation, but the other part of it is he can't throw his wide receivers open. And so, like, if these guys aren't wide open, they're not getting pass completions. So I'm not buying. Can I sell? Is anybody interested in buying, or can you find a rebuilding team that wants to take this on? You give me some better points. I don't know what you could slot in there instead of Michael Pittman, but that value has fallen off quite a bit, and I don't see it returning at any point, at least this season, because the Colts are incentivized to try and make this work. I don't think you're going to see Joe Flacco get inserted if Anthony Richardson is healthy at any point this season. I think they're going to try their darndest to make it work. And, to Anthony Richardson's defense, he needs these repetitions. He has not had a lot of game reps in college, in the NFL. He needs these repetitions. So I just don't think you're going to get anything out of Michael Pittman for the rest of the season.
Zach, out of 39 quarterbacks, with at least 20% of 310 dropbacks, which is the most dropbacks any quarterback has had so far, Anthony Richardson has the lowest completion percentage of the bunch at 48.5%. And this just doesn't fly in the NFL. Like, I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And until that gets turned around, he's not doing anything to elevate things to a point. We've talked about this before, and this is why guys like Josh Allen kind of get a pass with some of, the shortcomings, is because they elevate so much more elsewhere. Anthony Richardson just isn't doing that at this point. So absolutely, that's a big part of why Michael Pittman, who is the main focus of this discussion, actually, is struggling. Like you said, when Joe Flacco is in, it's been much better for wide receivers. But even then, Josh Downs is carving out a much larger role in this offense, and I love saying that because I'm a huge Josh Downs supporter. Have always been a huge Josh Downs guy, but Michael Pittman is just kind of getting left by the wayside. What if not because of Josh Downs? Because the quarterback play. This quarterback play isn't going to help a lot of players do well. So moving on to our second panic meter segment, the panic meter for Michael Pittman for me would also be a 10. I don't think I have him anymore anywhere, but certainly a concern. Move off of Anthony Richardson while you still can, while he's still valued. I also, in that same deal, I moved off of Rashee Rice for A.J. Brown. I moved off of Anthony Richardson. So the main three on each side, I got Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, A.J. Brown. The other side received Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson, and Rashee Rice. And there were some other odds and ends in there too, but for fun reference, I guess you could say. So moving on to the second part of the panic meter segment here today, Garrett Wilson was tossed out as a name. And I have to assume that really this is because of the Davante Adams trade. It is what really is forcing people to panic. But if you look at this, still 9 targets apiece for both Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams. If you want to look at any concern with Garrett Wilson, it's been the same thing it's been his entire career, is converting his massive target share into actual points. But overall in the season, wide receiver 5, granted, he hasn't had a bye week yet. A lot of teams, a lot of top wide receivers have or have missed time. And on the season in points per game, he's wide receiver 12. So I don't really see a reason to panic here. It's probably well under 5 for me. I'm well under halfway on the top of the panic meter. So maybe a 2 or a 3, just because of, I know Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams are buddies, and maybe that leads to some things, and maybe Garrett Wilson getting factored out of some games. But the thing is when you have a very good wide receiver like Davante Adams, defenses have to respect that much more. And this should give Garrett Wilson a ton of opportunity to actually just have better opportunities, more quality in his opportunities, where he's not always getting draped by the number 1 corner, and he's actually able to have better games. We'll see what happens. I'm not concerned. Zach, are you concerned for Garrett Wilson at all at this point?
I would say my panic meter on Garrett Wilson is a 1. We look at the last 3 games, 42 targets. If you want to take it beyond that, if you want a larger sample size, the last 5 games, 60 targets. I got no reason to panic on Garrett Wilson whatsoever. I don't care about the Davante Adams trade. If anything, I can look at the Jets philosophically on offense the last 2 weeks since they moved off of Nathaniel Hackett as them getting their better players more involved in the offense. Like Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen was great, but he's kind of been a non-participant in this offense the last 2 weeks. And I like that, because let's give your best players the ball and stop taking the ball away from your best players to give it to guys who have been good, but it's Breece Hall, Remember, everybody, yeah. Breece Hall was on the panic meter a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, no, this is ridiculous. Like, none of this is on Breece Hall, and this is more a dereliction of the offensive line as opposed to Breece Hall. Same thing here with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is going to outlast this situation in New York. He's going to outlast Davante Adams. He's going to outlast Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson will be a member of the New York Jets for a long time. Who's his quarterback? I don't know, but he's going to be the quarterback 1 here for a good amount of time. Or I'm sorry, the wide receiver 1, even if Davante Adams is there. I think Davante Adams is more of a familiarity for Aaron Rodgers at this point. But no disrespect to Davante Adams, if you're funneling your offense through Davante Adams and not Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, I think that is a big, big mistake. I think that Davante Adams is there to be a safety net and a more reliable wide receiver than what the Jets have had, as opposed to Allen Lazard, who I think leads the league in drops, and Mike Wilson, who just Mike Williams, who can't get on the same page as with Aaron Rodgers, I should say. So my panic meter on this is a 1. I have no reason to panic. I would be full on into buying Garrett Wilson depending the cost, but I don't even think he belongs on this list, to be honest with you.
I am with you, and that's why I put him on the list, because I felt like it was such a, kind of a surprise name. Leading targets in the NFL right now, Garrett Wilson, with 76 on the season. So, and yes, he's played all of his games. Yeah, it's tough to really feel any worry for Garrett Wilson, a guy who has produced. He's been solid enough in your lineup. So, yeah, I pretty low for me as well. And you got to figure too, something else to take into consideration, talking real life football things. The Jets defense has been terrible. So they're going to be throwing in a lot of games where they have to play catch up, or they have to do this, that, or the other thing. And that just is going to create more opportunities for not only Garrett Wilson, but Devontae Adams as well. And this whole offense do something. Breece Hall is also a huge factor in the receiving game. So that is going to still play well for him. Even if they end up behind, he's still going to get work that way as well. So with that said, Zach, for sake of time here, I'm going to kick it right along to your move to make. You want to buy somebody. We talked about this offense already a little bit today, but what is your move to make? Who are you looking to buy? Tell me why.
Yeah, Bob, for me, I'm looking at buying into Najee Harris. Now, look, we did discuss Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren before the season. I still think they're both great players to stash or to have on your roster. And I'm going to get into Najee Harris here in just a second. But let's talk about some more analytical statistics here. The percentage of rushes coming in versus stacked boxes for Najee Harris in 2024. 20% when Justin Fields was at quarterback, only 5% in the game that Russell Wilson played. So you're seeing the difference in quarterback play have an effect on Najee Harris, his rushes coming against stacked boxes, which I believe means 8 players in the box. The percentage of Najee Harris rushes coming against light boxes, 29% when Justin Fields was the quarterback, 52% with Russell Wilson. So almost doubled with Russell Wilson at quarterback. So what does this translate to? Well, Najee Harris is seeing a much lighter stacked box when Russell Wilson is the quarterback, as opposed to when Justin Fields was the quarterback. And I think that's because Justin Fields is not really a downfield threat quarterback to throw the ball. Mm-hmm. He's more of a rushing quarterback. So teams are bringing more players into the box. When Russell Wilson is the quarterback, teams have to respect that ability to throw the ball down the field. We saw that yesterday with George Pickens have a phenomenal game. And that's going to make a huge difference for Najee Harris. Another stat that I really liked to see for Najee Harris, his yards per carry in each quarter, 3.1 in the first, 3.5 in the second, 4.5 in the third, and 4.7 yards per carry in the fourth quarter. So in the second half of games, Najee Harris is averaging almost 5 yards a carry, Bob, which again tells me what's the deduction that we can make there? Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers are physically wearing teams down with their style of play. And of course, we talked about this before the season with Arthur Smith there as the offensive coordinator. This is kind of what we expected the offense to look like. We didn't necessarily expect the downfieldness that Russell Wilson brought last game, but we did expect this kind of rushing attack, grind games out, win them 20-17. I can never say I expected the Steelers to score 37 points. And again, that's an attribute of the style and the physical nature of the game that was on Sunday night, where you just saw Pittsburgh wear down the Jets in the trenches on both sides of the football. So to me, Najee Harris is somebody that I would really be looking into buying and feeling incredibly comfortable in starting on a week in and week out basis, especially if Russell Wilson is the quarterback for the rest of the season.
I like this buy a good bit, Zach. I think it's one that I think you bring up the best point you could make here, I think, in my opinion, is the fact that defenses had to shift for the quarterback play and how that opens things up for Najee that much more. Having the different approach defensively, like, hey, we have to, all right, we can't just sit here with 8 guys in the box. We have to kind of spread things out to, actually defend the pass like they didn't necessarily have to with Justin Fields at the helm. Now, looking at some costs that went down, or completed trades that went down today, courtesy of Dynasty Daddy. This is the absolute most I think you'd ever have to pay for Najee at this point. And there's a 1 quarterback league, keep in mind, but it is a 25 first-round pick for Najee Harris. Zach, is that too rich for your blood?
Yeah. Listen, man, if I am an uber competitive team and I need that running back, sure. If that pick's going to be 111 or 112, 110, that's fine. But better than anybody, at least right now where we stand, that incoming running back class looks pretty decent. There's not a lot of security right now in Najee Harris, which is something that I always talk about. What's my running back security look like? Do they have 2-3 years left on the contract? Najee Harris has none. So I don't know where Najee Harris is playing football next year. Now, look, he's still a younger running back. I did talk last week. Hey, listen, I'm done with the whole age thing. Like we got to stop doing this because we're seeing uber productive players play into their late 20s, early 30s. Look at Joe Mixon last week. I bet you wish you had a lot of Joe Mixon, right? Who cares that he's 28 or 29 years old? So that doesn't bother me anymore with Najee Harris like it did maybe a year or two ago. But I don't know where he's playing. I don't know what his situation is. I think Pittsburgh is a phenomenal situation to be a running back of the pedigree of Najee Harris. So do I want to spend a first-round pick? Not if I can avoid it, but if I really need it, if it puts me over the top, if it really cements me into a championship picture, yeah, I do that.
Yeah, I too struggle with that one. I think I like this next couple trades I found, moving a 25 third and a 26 second for Najee Harris. Saw that twice. That same deal twice, different league formats, moving a 25 third round pick and a 26 second. I love that we're moving that better piece in 26 as opposed to 25. Just that little extra time to have to wait, to have to pay that greater asset, quote unquote, in the second round pick until 26. I love that. And I think this is a pretty fair cost. Zach, what do you think?
I'm totally in agreement with you here. I absolutely would love to do, even if they were both next year, second and third round pick, I'd love to do that. I do feel safe that Najee Harris will be a starting running back somewhere next year, whether it's in Pittsburgh or not. I do feel secure in that to spend that kind of capital on Najee Harris. So, yeah, I'd love to do it. I don't care if it's next year or not. I think a second and third is right where I'm at, or a second plus or a third plus a little something more. The first is really hard to swallow.
So speaking to your point, Zach, about not necessarily being all about the younger running back, looking at the top 12 running backs in fantasy football right now, fantasy football scoring so far this season, out of the top 12, 2 of them are in their first or second season in the NFL. 0 of them are actually in their first season. Those 2 being Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. Everyone else has been in the league for 3 or more seasons. The top 12, let me read them off to you real quick. Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry. Those guys are young spring chickens. Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, Chuba Hubbard, Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones, another spring chicken, and David Montgomery as well to wrap things out. So, I mean, 100%. And that trend, you can run that back almost every year. And it's just, I know we love to play the sexy game in Dynasty where it's like, oh, whoever's younger is better, but we see it every year. It's not the sexy young paper roster that gets you to a championship. It's the team putting up the most points and starting the best lineup. And oftentimes that's the older players sorting out through their prime and just sticking with it, man. That is the absolute key. And speaking of sticking with it, I appreciate y'all for sticking with it through this video. If you did and you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment down below some moves you're trying to make. Who are you panicking on? Who are you worried about when it comes to injuries? Who are you buying the injury dip on? And who are you piecing the heck out on when it comes to their injury history and whatnot? But with all that said, we're going to get the heck on out of here. We will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.